Okay, folks, had to sit through a kind of painful podcast of Ethan Van Sciver and Mark Brooks and Eric July, not all together in the same podcast or on the same threads, but basically trading barbs back and forth between, Mark Brooks representing the SJWs and Van Sciver and July representing Comicsgate. And basically the argument that was going back and forth was, who had the most fragile ego? Was it Comicsgate or was it the SJWs? Because Comicsgate side is accusing the SJWs of having a fragile ego from the fact of, hey, we've got all this money that we're collecting for doing our own thing, for publishing comics the way we want to publish comics. And, what have you got? Well, you're just working on other people's properties and you don't have anything of your own to show for it. And so every time we make money, your ego gets damaged. On the SJW side, the firing off at Comicsgate saying, well, we don't see anything in your property that's actually worth all the money that you're raking in, so you can't really attest this to being high quality. And, we just think that people are shoveling money in your direction is more like making a political statement as opposed to actually measuring your talent. You can't say that what you're doing is making so much money because it's good, because a lot of it is sight unseen. So, it just winds up being, labels going back and forth. You're the beta. No, you're the beta. You're the fragile ego. No, you're the fragile ego. And I think what we just got to do is honestly admit that there's fragile egos on both sides, and understandably so. When you are in Comicsgate, for example, you are basically putting yourself out there. You are putting yourself on the line. You are putting your own vision into existence and hoping that people are going to pay you money for it. So if somebody comes along and attacks your product and says stuff like, well, your product's not actually any good, I don't understand why people are handing you money, that's not just an attack on your product, that is an attack on you, because first of all, you're trying to actually earn a living doing this stuff in the first place, but on the other hand, you as a Comicsgater are very, very enmeshed with your property. This is the stuff that you love. This is not just some work-for-hire thing that somebody else can say, yeah, they wanted me to draw an X-Men cover, so I drew an X-Men cover and I got paid for it. Whoop-de-freaking-do. This is, I've got a baby in my mind, and I'm putting a baby out on the paper, and I love my baby, and I want my baby to shine. So, yeah, when you see the SJWs coming and attacking, it's not just an attack on the quality of the material itself, it's also an attack on you. Because you are the one promoting it, you are the one trying to establish a connection with a social media audience, and everything you do reflects on you. It's a very, very personal endeavor to be in Comicsgate. Now, on the SJW side, fragile ego? Yep, right there too. Why? Because you're seeing Comicsgaters getting money hand over fist for stuff that you don't think is good quality, which makes you wonder, what am I doing wrong? Is that some sort of comment on me? Is that some sort of comment on the work that I'm doing, that I'm not raking in the kind of money that they're raking in? You may make a comfortable salary, you may be able to support yourself very well, but at the same time, you're not, raking in the millions. You're not doing $3.5 million for a single book like Eric July just did, and you have to wonder, is this really a quality thing? Because if it is, then why is it that I assume I can put forward work of so much more quality than these braggarts and upstarts? Why am I not doing that kind of thing? Why shouldn't I go out on my own? You start to wonder if you're letting people pass you by when you could be doing as well as they are doing. And that can be an ego thing too. Am I being stupid here? Am I being stupid in working for the traditional comic book model that I am? And am I making a mistake by clinging to the big two and letting them be the ones that feed and clothe me as opposed to going out on my own and venturing my own properties and my own ideas and things like that? It's got to sow seeds of doubt in every SJW's mind who's working for the big two and basically sponging off of their long-standing material in order to make a living, what is it that I'm missing here? And so there's room for fragile egos on both sides. And so I don't think the answer is to say, oh, well, our egos aren't the fragile ones, yours is the fragile ones. It's just understand that we all have our own basic foibles and uncertainties and doubts and self-doubts, and people are going to say things that are going to play into those doubts when they're on the attack. I mean, it just stands to reason, because some people are threatened by other people's success, and then some people are threatened by other people's actual threats. I mean, who doesn't feel threatened by an actual threat every now and then? There's no reason to try and say, make it, oh no, you're the ones who are in the wrong, or you're the ones who are having all the emotions here. There are emotions in play on both sides, and there are people who are trying different things, who are trying, either the tried and true methods of working for the big two, or the new and adventurous methods of crowdfunding and self-publishing, and everybody's got reason to have fears. The fear on one hand of, what am I going to do if this doesn't work? And the fear on the other hand of, maybe I should try doing what they're doing. These are all valid and legitimate fears, and, hey, if it would be better to keep the animosity to a minimum and not take pot shots back at the others, because there may come a time when a Comicsgater says, I have some ideas for some of these big two characters that I've always wanted to see in print, and maybe if I got into those, maybe if I could get back on those titles, I could see some of my visions for where those characters could go come into play. And likewise, on the SJW side, maybe there's a time when they're going to say, I've had enough of working for the big two, and I'd like to strike out on my own. And wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have all your bridges burned in either direction, so that everybody could basically cross into each other's area as need be and be able to help each other out? That's the kind of thing, the kind of symbiosis that would be really nice to see in the comic book field. One where you don't have two sides that are sniping at each other and taking pot shots at each other, but rather two sides that are viewing the other with skepticism and curiosity and wanting to see what, if anything, is the appeal of the other side, and what, if anything, might actually be an avenue of opportunity in the future. Because at some point, some people are going to start out like Donny Cates did, starts out doing his own graphic novel stuff, gets acclaim, now he works for the big two, and maybe from there he's going to go right back into working on his own stuff, and then come back and work for the big two in a while. And it just becomes a revolving door of doing the creative work, and then doing more of the work for hire stuff as you have the ideas, as your creative juices flow in those particular dimensions. And let's not get so wrapped up in taking shots at each other that we don't wind up setting dams in our way, so that those creative juices, when we want them to flow in this direction, we're having to, have them flow against aqueducts that we've already blown up with the antipathy of the past. That's not a good strategy for the future. So I would say, I know that there's monetization of other people's hate to be made in terms of having these discussions. But when you have these discussions, and when you have the opportunity to monetize people sniping at you, you can do it in such a way that you say, you may have a point. You may have a point, for example, that it isn't necessarily the quality of Eric July's ISOM that's getting him $3.5 million, because Mark Brooks is very right to point out that there's no lettered pages out there for us to actually see what the quality of his writing is. How are we supposed to know this is actually going to be a good product based on 2 or 3 unlettered pages, some of which I've already shown in a previous video I have some issues with? and things like character design, things like where Mark Brooks was sniping and saying, I don't think that the story of ISOM is all that original or it's all that exciting. Well, that's just echoing the same sentiment that I had. Now, everything depends on the execution. You can have a tried and true story that's been told for the 3,000th time be something wonderful and fresh and original depending on how you tell it. So just the fact that some of these story patterns seem to be the same as what you've seen before, and maybe even some of the designing and costuming, it doesn't really wow you, depending on the execution, it can turn out to be something great. So, on those kinds of shots, take the shots, take them, evaluate them for what they are, and realize that they may have a point, but at the same time, look, you're out there, the equal point on the Comicsgate side, we're out here pursuing our dreams. We want to make comics the way that we make them. If we're not making them to your liking, that's not really the point. We want to make them to the liking of ourselves, first and foremost, and the liking of the readers who are going to give us feedback after buying our product and actually investing in us and trying to propel us forward, because we know from their investment that they at least want to help. They at least want to see us succeed. And then, yeah, it's just I want people to take the criticism from both sides seriously. On the SJW side, what they could definitely take seriously is the notion that there is this culture war going on. One of the things that I could not believe, it was really unfathomable, is the assertion by Mark Brooks that there is no culture war going on. Really, dude? Really? If you looked at X-Men 14, which just came out this week, you had a comic book in which you had a editor who was supposed to take this story from a reporter about Iceman, the gay mutant character, saving the world, and he basically said, can we just drop the gay angle? Because what does that have to do with anything? He's Iceman, saved the world. Do you have to mention that he's gay? Well, as it turned out, there is an interview that was given by Iceman in which he refers to himself as being gay and a mutant. But at the same time, how many times in the newspapers do you only print part of an interview? Plenty of times. Plenty of times. In fact, so many hit pieces have been made out of articles that have been cut up and just resected in order to present the editorial view that the paper wants to show. And so the editor's just basically saying, look, the gay part isn't really pertinent to the story here. Can we just leave that out and talk about this mutant saving the world? And the reporter's like, you're trying to erase him. You're just a small-minded bigot, and I'm not going to cater to that. You have to print the whole story as I wrote it, or I'm just going to retract the whole thing. Like a spoiled frickin' brat. And what that message basically sends is that, look, if you are the kind of person where you think that a person's sexuality is one of the least important things about that person and does not need to be at the forefront of any given story, including that person, well, then you're just a small-minded bigot. And why aren't you being celebratory the same way that, people in pride parades aren't being celebratory? Well, because guess what? There's a whole big segment of the world out there that still thinks that LGBTQ conditions is a tragedy to be tolerated and not diversity to be celebrated. And for you to punch all those readers in the face and at the same time say there's no culture war, say that there's no attempt to exclude or shame readers, yeah, that's gaslighting of like the highest order. So, yeah, read your own books. If you don't know that there's a culture war going on, it can only be because you're staggeringly ignorant of what the companies you work for are putting out. So the Comicsgaters have a point too. The SJWs have a point about the Comicsgaters, and the Comicsgaters have a point about the SJWs. Rather than take fire on both sides and shoot at each other these sniping remarks and barbs that are just going to stick and cause enmity for long periods of time, what would really be great is if both sides just listened to each other and gave each other the rocket fuel that they needed in order to propel themselves down the avenues of opportunity that could come their way whenever they decide, you know what, I'm ready for a change. I've done the solo comics gating thing for a while. I'd like to work for the big two for a little bit. Or I've been working for the big two so long, I'd really like to go off and do my own thing. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of room on the road for all of these different paths if we just all listen to each other and take the input as it needs to be. But if you're going to cling to one or the other ideology and exclude everything else, well, you know, there's going to become a point where you may have just shot yourself in the foot. So anyway, that's been my comics rant. Sorry if it's taken a little longer than I expected, but I wanted to try and get all of that out on the table in one video rather than making two. Thank you for watching. I'm Mike Partika. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you later.